They say every man hits a breaking point. Mine had a name, Kate. We met in the glow of champagne and skyline views, when my life was on fire and my heart still believed in fairy tales. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and rewrote the mood. People didn't just notice her. They rearranged themselves around her. I was already rising fast with my ad agency, co-founded with my best friend Lucas Grayson. Together, we built Grayson and Hale from scratch, pitching million-dollar campaigns to billion-dollar clients. Kate made everything look better. For a while. But beauty fades. Charm erodes. And when the makeup comes off, sometimes you're left with someone you don't even recognize. Our marriage was already starting to crack when she got pregnant. It should have been good news. It could have changed everything. But I panicked. We weren't ready. The timing was wrong. The business needed me, and I asked her to consider other options. She listened to me, and it ruined her. There were complications. She lost more than the baby. She lost the ability to ever have one again. The day she came home from the hospital, she didn't cry. She didn't speak. She stared at the wall like it owed her an apology. And though she never blamed me out loud, I saw it in the way her eyes hardened whenever I mentioned children. Something between us quietly died that year, and we never buried it properly. Then came Michael, my sister's boy, 11 years old and smarter than most adults I knew. After she passed away, there was no question about it. He came to live with me. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Michael was bright, observant, and heartbreakingly quiet. He'd lost his world and was trying to build a new one out of silence. I became his guardian. In time, he started calling me Uncle Nate again. A small victory. He felt like my son in every way but blood. Kate, however, wasn't interested in children, not even ones. Michael irritated her. His questions, his awkward silences, the way he made her feel like an outsider in her own home. We went through 3 nannies in 4 months. Kate drove them all out, said they were incompetent or too soft. One left in tears. Another didn't even come back to pick up her last paycheck. Then Ashley showed up. She was calm, grounded, patient, everything Kate wasn't. She didn't try to impress Michael, she just listened. She taught him how to build model planes and kept a whiteboard schedule he actually followed. For the first time since his mother's funeral, I heard him laugh. Kate noticed. And she didn't like it. She started making subtle jabs. She dresses like a teacher's pet, or, isn't she a little too interested in our family? I brushed it off. Ashley was doing her job, better than anyone before her. But Kate's resentment festered. She began snapping at Michael, more openly, criticizing how he ate, how he walked, even how he breathed. One night at dinner, she muttered, "You're not even ours. You don't belong here." Michael didn't flinch. He just looked her dead in the eye and said, "Good, I don't want to belong to you." I had to step in before it got worse, but the line had already been crossed. Kate's drinking picked up. 1 glass of wine became 2, then 3. The mood in the house shifted. Ashley tried to stay out of it, but even she couldn't hide the tension. Then it happened. I came home late one evening. The air was thick like a storm had just passed. Kate was standing in the living room, arms folded, face glowing with the kind of satisfaction only cruelty brings. "Found something interesting today," she said, tossing a velvet box on the coffee table. I opened it and froze. Inside were a pair of diamond earrings. I recognized them immediately. Kate's. A gift from me on our 2nd anniversary. She'd worn them to galas, dinners, photo shoots, expensive, sentimental. "They were in Ashley's purse," she said, her voice syrupy and sweet. "Tucked beneath a makeup bag." Ashley stood nearby, pale as a ghost. I never touched them." My head spun. Kate was smirking like she'd won a silent war. The logic didn't add up. Why would Ashley steal Kate's earrings? Why hide them in a place so obvious? But the image was already painted. Ashley the thief. Ashley the liar. I didn't know what to say. And silence, in that moment, was a decision. I think it's best if you leave, I finally said. Ashley's face collapsed. Not from guilt, from heartbreak. She gathered her things in silence while Michael stood by the staircase, hands balled into fists. Kate sipped her wine and whispered as Ashley passed, "Next time, keep your hands off what's not yours." Ashley didn't reply. She just walked, out the door. Then Michael lost it. He spun toward Kate, eyes filled with fury and something else. Betrayal. "You think he won't find out?" he shouted, voice cracking. "You think you're smart? I'll tell him. I'll tell him you kissed Lucas, right there in the garden when you thought no one was watching." The glass slipped from Kate's hand and shattered on the floor. My blood turned to ice. Lucas, my best friend, my business partner, Michael stood. Trembling, chest heaving. Kate's face had gone white. She looked at me, then back at him, then stormed out of the room like a grenade with the pin pulled. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The air in the room had curdled. My life had just split in two, and I hadn't even seen the blade. Lucas and I met in college. We were two broke kids with oversized ambition and undersized resumes, pitching branding ideas in dorm rooms while eating instant noodles for dinner. He was charisma incarnate, the guy who could sell sand to a desert dweller. I was quieter, more strategic. We balanced each other, built trust, built a future. And when we both met Kate at an industry gala 10 years ago, we fell, hard. She walked in wearing blood-red silk and a look that said, "I already know what you're going to say, and no, I won't laugh." Lucas saw her first, nudged me. "That one," he said, pointing with his glass. "She's going to ruin us both." We spent the whole night orbiting her, competing, joking, offering drinks, compliments, attention. But it was me she called back the next day. Me she had coffee with. Me she kissed in the back of a town car 2 weeks later. Lucas never said a word about it. Not then. He just smiled and poured another round of bourbon. I thought we were past it. Years later, after the wedding, Lucas remained my right hand. When Kate started spending more time out, shopping trips, spas, charity events, he filled in the blanks. Always there with advice, a sarcastic joke, a drink. "You've got the empire," he'd say, "but no time for the queen. That's how kingdoms fall, you know." I didn't know how right he was. Things at the agency began to shift about a year after Michael moved in. Key clients started dropping. One blamed budget cuts. Another cited creative differences. But I saw through the PR. Our reputation was slipping. Deadlines missed. Campaigns rejected. Something was off. Lucas played the role of the loyal partner perfectly. "I'll handle it," he said. "You've got enough going on at home. Kate's drinking more, isn't she? And that kid, he's a lot. She's lonely, man." He was, always just concerned enough to sound genuine. Never too pushy, never too obvious. But now, in hindsight, I see it. How his presence in our home became routine. How Kate stopped complaining when he was around. How they started whispering in corners, sharing smirks they thought I didn't notice. The kiss Michael saw wasn't just a kiss. It was confirmation of something deeper, something already rotting beneath the surface. Kate's mood swings worsened. She started disappearing for hours, then entire nights. Her perfume would linger in the hallway, masking the stench of cheap whiskey and desperation. One night she stumbled in at 3 a.m., heels in hand, mascara smeared. "I lost some money," she mumbled. "How much?" "Don't worry about it." But I did worry. I checked the credit cards. 20 grand vanished in 2 weeks. Casino charges, private clubs, ATMs I didn't recognize. Then I found a receipt in her coat pocket, a cash withdrawal backed by a personal loan. The lender? Grayson Capital, Lucas's private finance shell. When I confronted him, he smiled like a magician, revealing the final card. "She came to me," he said, palms raised. "Said she needed help. I tried to talk her out of it. But hey, I didn't force her to gamble. I just didn't want her going to strangers." "But you are a stranger," I spat. He chuckled. "Not to her." I wanted to hit him. Instead, I walked away, straight into the storm I didn't see coming. A week later, our firm accountant pulled me aside. "You should look at these documents," she whispered. Her eyes were wide, scared. Lucas had filed ownership paperwork, quietly, efficiently. Kate had transferred her shares, my shares by marriage, to him as repayment for her debt. He now owned 100% of Grayson and Hale. When I stormed into his office, he was already packing his things. "You shouldn't have trusted a gambler," he said, not looking up. I remember staring at him in disbelief, like he was someone I'd never seen before. "You were supposed to be my friend." "No," he said coldly. "I was your competition. You just didn't know it." Kate had vanished by then. No calls, no texts. She wasn't answering the door at her apartment. I tried every number I had. Then I got a message. From Lucas, of all people. "I think she's up at the lake house. She's been acting strange. You should check on her." The lake house. Our secluded escape. A place for summer grilling, New Year's champagne, and once, the vow I whispered in her ear. "This will always be our place." I drove up in silence. An hour through back roads, the trees closing in like judgment. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, her car was there. The lights were on inside, but the house was quiet. Too quiet. I stepped in, heart thudding. "Kate?" Nothing. A shattered wine glass lay on the floor in the living room. One heel on the stairs. And at the foot of them, Kate. Still. Pale, eyes open, but unfocused. I dropped to my knees. "Kate! Kate!" She didn't move. Blood. It was pooled beneath her head, a dark halo on the hardwood. I don't remember calling 911. I don't remember the paramedics or the flashing lights. I remember the officer's voice as he took my statement. Calm, measured, and then, 2 hours later, the knock on the interrogation room door. "You're under arrest for the suspected homicide of your wife, Catherine Hale. Jail has its own." Silence. Not peaceful, not blank. It hums like a live wire waiting to snap. Cold concrete. Flickering lights. The metallic clank of doors that only open from the outside. They left me in that holding cell for hours. Maybe days. Time blurred. Into a haze of caffeine breath and interrogations. Over and over. "Where were you before the lake house? What happened between you and your wife that night? Why didn't you call police immediately? Did she have enemies?" Only one name hovered between the lines. Mine. They didn't say it outright. But the tone shifted. The glances. The way the younger officer couldn't meet my eyes after I said, "I loved her." He didn't believe me. Nobody did. The media had a field day. CEO turned suspect. Ad empire tainted by blood. They showed my mugshot next to Kate's modeling. Photos. Power couple ends in tragedy. I watched it play on the TV mounted in the corner of the common area. Some other inmates chuckled. Others just stared. I turned away. But the worst part, worse than the concrete slab I slept on or the eyes that followed me like shadows, was not knowing how Michael was holding up. The last time I saw him, he was yelling about Lucas. And now he had no one but Ashley. She stepped in immediately, took him home, gave him something to hold on to. When the social worker came to question her fitness as a temporary guardian, Michael stood behind her and said, "She's more family than anyone else." I have left. He cried at night. Called out for me. Sometimes she'd hear him whisper from the hallway, "Uncle Nate didn't do it. He didn't." Ashley never believed I was guilty. Not for a second. And that's what saved my life. Because Ashley noticed something no one else did. It started with a memory, a conversation months earlier. Lucas had been in our kitchen, swirling whiskey in a glass, flashing that gold ring of his like it was a badge. Thick, vintage style with engraved initials. LG, he wore it on his right hand, always. A symbol of loyalty to the business, he claimed. He once joked he'd be buried with it. But at Kate's funeral, a private ceremony where whispers replaced prayers, Lucas showed up somber, dressed head to toe in black, and barehanded. Ashley noticed. Not right away. But days later, while washing dishes, it hit her. The ring was gone. She asked him about it, casually. "You stopped wearing your lucky ring?" Lucas stiffened, shrugged, lost it, don't remember where. But his voice was too flat, his answer too rehearsed. "Ashley, Didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she made her decision. Packed a small bag, made sure Michael was safe with a neighbor, and drove straight to the lake house, alone. She knew it was risky, maybe even insane, but she trusted her gut. And her gut said the truth was still buried in that house. She retraced every step Kate could have taken. Kitchen, stairs, bedroom. She stood in the room where Kate had fallen, looked around slowly, scanning for anything that didn't belong. And then she saw it, a faint glint beneath the corner of the old oak dresser, one we hadn't moved in years. Ashley dropped to her knees, reached under, her fingers closed around cold metal. The ring, Lucas's ring, still smeared with dried blood. She didn't wait. She took photos, bagged it in a Ziploc from her purse, drove straight to a private lab where a friend owed her a favor. The results came back in 48 hours. The blood was a match for Kate Hale, but that wasn't all. The impact analysis showed blunt force trauma consistent with the edge of the ring. A defensive injury turned fatal. Ashley handed the evidence over to the defense attorney working my case. Within hours, the story flipped. Suddenly, I wasn't the jealous husband anymore. I was the setup. It wasn't hard for investigators to connect the rest. Phone pings placed Lucas near the lake house 2 hours before I arrived. Surveillance from a nearby gas station caught him buying liquor, the same brand found open on the floor next to Kate. Even worse, a neighbor, an old man named Mr. Robbins, came forward once the media cooled down. He heard shouting that night, a man yelling, a woman screaming, then silence. He didn't think it was important. Didn't want to get involved, he told police, but the nail in Lucas's coffin came from the ring itself. Forensic analysis revealed skin tissue embedded beneath the ridges, belonging to Kate. The blow had been up close, personal, intentional. They rearrested Lucas mid-meeting. He looked stunned, like a magician caught with wires and mirrors exposed. In court, the prosecution painted a clear picture: mounting debts, greed, jealousy. Lucas had manipulated Kate, drained her emotionally and financially, then silenced her when she became a liability. His defense was weak. He claimed self-defense, claimed Kate slipped, claimed he tried to help her, but the evidence was too strong, the timeline too precise. Ashley testified with calm precision. Michael sat in the front row, holding my hand. When the verdict came, I didn't breathe. The judge leaned forward, voice steady. The court finds the defendant, Lucas Grayson, guilty of second-degree murder and obstruction of justice. You are hereby sentenced to 25 years in state prison without the possibility of parole. Lucas didn't flinch, just stared at me, and for the first time in our lives, I saw something real in his eyes. Fear. The first breath I took as a free man didn't taste like air. It tasted like survival. 217 days. That's how long I sat in that cell, waiting for a world that still believed in me. For justice to catch up with betrayal. For truth to be louder than scandal. When the gates finally opened, I stepped out into the kind of morning that makes you believe in second chances. Pale sun, clean sky, and there they were, Michael and Ashley, standing by a weather-worn bench near the parking lot. He saw me first. Uncle Nate. He ran full speed, backpack flapping, arms open. I dropped my bag and caught him mid-air. God, he'd grown. His hair was longer, his voice deeper, but the weight of him in my arms, it was the same, familiar, solid. Home. Ashley approached quietly, eyes wet but smiling. She waited until Michael stepped back before she reached for me. I didn't hesitate. Pulled her into my chest like I'd wanted to since the day I lost everything. If it weren't for you, I whispered, I wouldn't be standing here. She didn't say anything at first, just held me tighter. And when she pulled away, her voice was soft but steady. It wasn't just for him, she said, glancing at Michael. It was for you too. Somewhere along the way, I stopped protecting him from you. I started protecting you with him. We didn't need more words. Some things are understood in silence. The fallout was brutal but not permanent. The media corrected the headlines, reluctantly. Lucas was yesterday's scandal, and the public had already moved on to fresher tragedies. But for those of us left behind, the damage was real. Grayson and Hale had been gutted. The brand was radioactive. Clients fled the moment Lucas's name hit the news ticker. I could have let it die, started over, changed my name and buried the past, but I didn't. I bought back the remaining assets, hired new staff, renamed it Hale Creative. Clean, simple, just my name, no shadows attached. It wasn't easy. The first few months were hell. Late nights, cold calls, rejections, but one by one old partners came back, quietly at first. Then, with open arms, they said the same thing. We always knew it wasn't you, and somehow, that was enough. Ashley. And Michael moved in 6 weeks after my release. At first, it was practical. She didn't want him to switch schools again, and my house had more space. But we all knew it was more than that. Dinners turned into game nights. Movie nights turned into long talks on the couch. Mornings with coffee turned into smiles that lingered longer than they should. One night, as we sat on the back porch, watching Michael chase fireflies barefoot across the lawn, I turned to her. "You saved my life," I said. Ashley looked at me, eyes shining from the reflection of porch lights. "You were worth saving." "I thought I lost everything," I said. "My wife, my business, my name." She reached for my hand. "You lost someone who never loved you, and you found people who do." I didn't know I was crying until she touched my cheek. Then she whispered something that changed everything. "I love him, Nate. I love Michael like he's mine. But somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, too." I didn't respond, just leaned in and kissed her, and it felt like coming up for air after drowning. We took Michael back to the lake house that fall, not to erase the past, but to reclaim it. The leaves had turned gold, the air crisp and clean. We scrubbed the house top to bottom, repainted the walls, replaced the staircase. Then Ashley hung a new plaque by the front door, whitewashed wood, carved letters. "Welcome home." Michael stood between us, arms around both our waists, grinning like the kid he never got to be. He looked up at me. "So, are we like a real family now?" Ashley smiled. "What do you think?" He shrugged in mock seriousness. "I think I finally get my own room." We laughed, all three of us, loud, messy, honest laughter. It echoed. Through the trees and into the sky. I lost my wife, but I found a family, and this time, I'm never letting go.